What? Joking.
Just don't believe it.
Would you really?
Well, this is an unusual watch for a lady to be wearing.
Yes, it doesn't actually belong to me, it belongs to my father.
Mm-hmm. So you're the person who had to queue up, bring it in.
Yeah, for quite a few hours.
Wristwatches have become the new collecting fashion in the last
Yes.
few years, and this is possibly only the second one we've had on the programme in 10 years. So I've been waiting for an opportunity to tell people that it is now something that you don't throw away your second-hand wristwatch, you check it out first. This is in fact a Rolex, a model known as the Oyster model, with its original strap. This strap here is an expanding bracelet, and it's quite clear from the design of it that it's made in the 50s, probably somewhere between 1955 and 1960. The standard Rolex model like this second-hand is maybe worth £1,500, £2,000. But this dial here, this enamel here, with Poseidon in the centre, which is done to simulate champlevé enamel. It's actually champlevé simulating cloisonné. Sorry, it looks like it's actually gold lines and cloisonné, but it's in fact a champlevé pattern. It was very rare, and it was done for only a few models and makes. And Patek Philippe used it, and Rolex used it. And I have never seen, well, only one other example of a Rolex with that particular dial. So without that, and I imagine actually that wouldn't be everybody's taste either.
Yes. No, it is quite unusual.
Now, it's also actually somewhat unusual for a man to have one of these in England, because it's very much a Swiss style.
Yes, he bought it from an auction. A pawnbroker put it into an auction and he bought it from there about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask how much he paid?
£450.
Well, there was one in New York sold not very long ago. It was a square one.
Yes.
And it made $37,000.
Oh, gosh.
Which is over £20,000. Now, I wouldn't promise that for this, but I'd certainly think about 15,000.
I'm sure you know that that is the crown monogram of Wilhelm II.
Yes, I have.
Who was
watch,
grandson of Queen Victoria.
Yes.
So how did a watch like this come into your possession?
Presented to my father's uncle, William Phillips, for the rescue of some German sailors, mariners, on the high seas on the 13th of March, 1906.
What a nice story. I have to say that the Germans and the Americans were always very generous with those sort of presentations.
Yes.
Lovely crisp engraving. I mean, the watch is hardly used. Very, very mint condition. Let's open that outer. And there on the cuvette, we have a relief of the Kaiser himself, again underneath his crown. The watch I see here is 14 karat gold.
Yes.
And I would suggest to you that the Kaiser's head is going to be 18 karat. It's much yellower.
Yes.
And if we open that cuvette, it's almost certainly going to be riveted on the back. And again, you can just see that tiny little rivet where it's been held on from behind.
In the centre of the watch, yes.
Absolutely. But I have to tell you that the watch is Swiss, and it's Swiss throughout.
Yes.
It wasn't made in Germany. The slight giveaway, it's very, very small, but just there underneath the regulator is a Swiss cross.
Yes.
Now, technically, this watch is very nice. It might seem a bit rude of me to ask, but you mentioned a date of 1906. There's no inscription on the watch, so why do you think that it's that date?
Because, with the watch was presented a citation and silver medal.
So you've got the whole history of the presentation there?
Of the presentation
oh, that's
there.
brilliant. That actually, in many respects, is nicer than just an inscription on the watch.
Yes, indeed, yes.
I suppose if it came up at auction now and a collector bought it, you'd probably get in the region of £1,500 with the citation as well. It's not a lot,
no.
But without that, the watch would be significantly less money.
Yes.
Oh, lovely. How did you get this one?
Well, I inherited it from my father, but I had seen it before, about 50 years ago, when I was a lad. And I found it in a tin box whilst looking through the cupboard.
Hang on, let me stop you. You mean you haven't seen this watch for about 50 years?
No, that's true.
How
50
incredible.
years ago.
We've got a running seconds in this lower dial here. We've got the normal minutes and hour display.
Right.
And then we've got the day of the week here on that subsidiary. On this other one, in the 3 o'clock position, we've got the date. And then up here below the 12 o'clock, we've got phases and age of the moon. And a little sign saying Greenwich time. So it's a full calendar watch with lunar work. And you've never seen it. It's absolutely incredible. And let's have a look. Oh, this is, to think that this has been put away for 50 years. We've got there 7 subsidiary dials for the cities that would have been important then. The centre is Paris. We've got New York, St. Petersburg, Calcutta, and then at the bottom, Melbourne. Fancy that.
The one thing that does puzzle me is, would it have been used by a traveller, or is it just a novelty to have the times of the different cities?
I think we could say that's a seriously rich man's toy.
Oh, yeah. No.
Any thoughts on its value?
No, no idea.
Today, realistically, one would be looking around £4,000 as a starting figure.
Just don't believe it.
Well,
No.
I wonder how other many goodies there are
Well,
in that tin.
in the tin, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Initially, we can see it's signed by John Aylward of Guildford. So did the clock come from the south, or have you known it always up here?
Yes, my father came from Sussex, and his relatives came from Sussex as well.
The immediate thing that hits you is the size of the dial, which is a 10-inch dial. And again, perhaps more striking is the use of a single hand on an 8-day clock.
Yeah.
And you'll see that this very large silver chapter ring is actually divided into 5-minute divisions.
Yes.
So for pretty accurate reading, I mean, you can actually read that to within a minute or two.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Signed, obviously, there in the matted centre, but I don't know whether you'd noticed, signed below the chapter ring in a much earlier script.
Oh.
Do you see there? But it's slightly
Yes, I
obscured
can.
by the
Yes.
chapter ring.
Yes.
And I think we can probably account for that later. Going up to the arch, we have a date dial with a nicely engraved centre there and a matching hand.
Yes.
Now, turning the clock round, it is fairly obvious to see that the arch has at some stage been added to the 10-inch dial.
Yes.
Now, bearing in mind that this man died in about 1720, the use of the arch was really, certainly in the provinces, not recorded at that time, not as a general rule anyway. So we can assume that this arch has probably been added slightly later, and this might account for various holes here where the chapter ring might have been altered slightly in order to accommodate this date dial, which has dropped slightly from the original there.
Added by somebody else then, presumably?
Added by a clockmaker, perhaps at a
Yes.
slightly later
Yes.
date. And I would think we're only talking about 20 or 30 years later.
Yeah.
But the joy of this, really, is the absolutely lovely movement. We've got 6 ringed pillars, 2 obviously, you can see there, and all the pillars are latched. Now, the normal method of fitting pillars together is to pin them with a steel pin. But you can see here on this dial foot that you've actually got a little latch which just swivels round. So when a clockmaker wants to take the clock to pieces for cleaning or whatever, he can just literally take it apart with a flick of a few fingers. So a wonderful, wonderful clock. And let's turn to the case, which is here. And the reason we've taken it out of the case, sadly, is because the case has been, well, rather over-restored, and it does slightly detract from it. We've lost a lot of the patination. Did you have that done fairly recently or not?
About 10 years ago.
Do you have it insured?
Not separately.
Not separately. Well, you ought to have it insured separately, because it's a super thing. If the case was in lovely original condition, for a 10-inch walnut case with such an obscure, if I might use that word, movement, we'd be talking about perhaps, well, really anything up to £8,000 to £10,000 at auction. With the case in this state, probably no more than about 5,000 to 6,000.
Yeah.
But it is a very, very unusual clock.
Yes.
Being over here in Denmark, I was hoping very much that I would see a watch like this, because Urban Jørgensen was the most famous Danish watchmaker of all time, and since we're very close to Copenhagen, that's where he worked, I would have hoped that we'd have got one. In fact, this example is by his brother, who was called Frederick Jurgensen,
Yeah.
and his signature is actually here on the back
Yeah.
of the cuvette. And he was sent to run a factory that they had about 50 kilometers from here. Now, I wanted to ask you a question. Are you a collector of watches?
No, my husband bought them in auction about 7 or 8 years ago, I think.
Just by chance? I mean, he...
Yeah.
Yes, he likes gold-coloured things. They were so nice. He couldn't resist them. I think they're beautiful too.
Well, that's interesting because he picked a good one in this. Let me see if I can get it out. Now, it has a peculiarity in the movement, which I won't go into too much detail, but it's called a double-wheel duplex escapement. What it consists of is that inside here there are actually two wheels, one on top of the other,
Yeah.
whereas in a normal watch of this type there would only be one wheel.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference to the value and to the collector's interest. Could I ask you how much you paid for this particular one?
I think we paid about 3,000 kroner, about £300.
Well, that's good news. Well, that's 30,000 kroner today, which is about £2,500.
2,500 today? What?
You're absolutely right. It is a hunter watch. In other words, it's apparently double-backed. The interesting thing is, and I'm sure we'll see by opening it, that it is a full calendar watch. You've got the day, the date, the month, and a moon. And the other thing that you might not have known is if I press this button here, it repeats to the nearest minute.
I have heard it chime before.
Have you?
I didn't know which one did it.
Well, that really is very nice. It's Swiss, of course, and just looking at it here, I can see a small mark saying it's 14 karat gold, and it's clearly for the German market, because we've got both the day and the month indication in German. The other button up at the top here is to operate the center seconds chronograph. So you've obviously had it at home for a while and not very familiar with how it works. Have you actually seen the gongs in operation at all?
No, I haven't actually.
Well, let's have a look at that. Press that button again and the gongs strike.
Oh, how interesting.
Sticking a little bit, possibly could do with a clean, I think. How long has it been lying around for?
I don't know, it belonged to my grandfather, and my mother's had it about 20 odd years, and it's been lying around in a drawer.
Has it really? Well, the date of the watch is about 1870, 1875. It's just a lovely quality thing, it really is. Absolutely gorgeous. It would cost, in a London sale room now, in the region of £4,000.
Would it really?
Yes. So I would suggest you have it insured for rather more than that.
Oh, isn't that charming?
Yes.
Absolutely lovely. Look at all these little cherubs all the way around, sides, two on the back, another one there, and one on the top.
Yes.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes, it is. Yeah, lovely.
Do you have it working at home?
Well, yes, I did, but a child played with it while I was out and dropped it. And
Well, let's see what's actually been done. Let's open it up. I mean, it's so tiny. Oh no, I can see that the balance is broken. The little balance that goes like that with the hairspring is broken. That's going to be an expensive repair. But it's such a sweet little thing. It's in gilt metal. The enamel is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you know which country it comes from?
Paris.
Do you think so?
It was bought in Paris.
It was bought in Paris.
It was bought in Paris by father for mother. And it was always, as far as I know, in the family. And father thought it was French.
Well,
we don't know whether it is.
I have to say that it's very strange because on the bottom it has the anchor mark with GB, which is Gustav Becker,
really?
which is German.
Oh, really?
So he bought it in France, but it's definitely
definitely
Certainly
German.
the case is certainly
It is.
German. Well, even in this condition.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think of the price?
Oh, well, I mean, how much would you say it was worth without the repair?
Well, in this condition, I think it would still fetch close on £1,000.
Would it? Yeah. Well, I thought about that, really.
That carriage revolves once every 52.5 minutes. Now, Reed & Sons, of course, would not have made this. They were the retailer. This particular sort of carousel was made by a man called Bonnickson. And Bonnickson, on behalf of Reed's, would have sent it to the observatory at Kew for a certificate of the finest timekeepers. And although it's got a QA, 82.8 is by no means brilliant. But certainly to somebody up in the northeast, the fact that it had QA engraved on it would have actually been quite a nice thing. I like the watch. It's technically very interesting. There are obviously many, many ordinary gold watches, but that's rather more special. Current price at auction there between about 2,500 and 3,200. So I actually suggest you wear it.
This is one of those Swiss watches that appears to give you a lot more for your money than is actually there. It wasn't very expensive when it was new, but if we open it up, you can see it's got a complete full calendar mechanism. It gives you the month, the day of the month, the day of the week, phase of the moon, the seconds, the hours, the minutes, and indeed it also has a chronograph, a stopwatch. And the movement, the same again, is, there we are, this wonderful on the back here, the cuvette. They call this cover over the moment the cuvette.
Yes.
And they're really out there to tell you how marvellous they are. They've got Médaille d'Or, gold medal, Bordeaux 1895, the Diploma of Honour in Paris in 1896, and so on and so on. And this was all sort of to boost your belief that this was a wonderful craftsmanship work of art. Chronograph, 3 calendars, a repetition, and the number. And in fact, these were mass-produced. Again, the quality of the movement, all polished steel, fully jewelled. But it's surprising what they can actually do for the money. An English watch of this type with these sort of complications would cost several £100, perhaps 400, whereas this probably was something of the order of £80 to £100 when it was new. It is a repeater, and indeed it repeats a double stroke for the quarters. There we are. Which is a fake carry-on. The more expensive versions had a ting-tang-tong strike on the quarter, and they used 3 gongs, and they've cleverly fitted a double stroke on 1 gong to give you the impression that it's a full carry-on. Yeah. Is this a piece that's come down in the family, I ask?
Yes, it was either my great-uncle or my grandfather's.
Yeah.
And it was left in a deposit box at the bank.
Yeah.
And it was only when the bank started charging rent that I, in fact, collected the box. And we had it at home for something like 6 months or so, because we hadn't got a key to the box. So my wife decided to smash the box open. And we found that and a lot of junk and a pair of cufflinks.
Great. Well, that's very good news. I was hoping you'd give a story like that, because usually they've been worn, and the worst thing you can do with one of these watches is wear it.
It wears out.
Absolutely.
It wears out.
And this is built rather like an egg. In fact, you know, an egg is quite strong.
Yes.
You can squash the top. But if
Yes.
you took a file, a sort of nail file, and filed the top of that, one stroke on that egg, it would collapse in your hands. And the same goes for these cases. Once they've been worn, even for a year or two, and the slightest wear, they literally become so thin, they become like one of those old sewing machine oil cans, you know, the pick-pock, pick-pock, pick-pock.
Yes.
So they weren't really a good thing to buy.
Well, they were very good, you know, a lot for your money. They looked the business.
Yes.
Having said that, when they are in good condition, they're still worth a few quid. You probably would have to pay for this now, sort of trade price would be around about £3,000. I'm glad you broke the box open.
Yes, so we, yes, yes, indeed.
It's probably one of the largest longcase clocks I've ever seen. It's absolutely massive, isn't it?
It is 9'2", I believe.
9'2", is it?
I think so, yes. Is it?
Well, I'm 6'2" and a bit, so yes, it's rather taller than me, that's all I can tell you. But the quality is fantastic. I mean, it's really making a statement, isn't it? Mm. Are you tall enough to wind it?
Yes. Oh, on a stall.
I love it. Well, up in the top of the arch, we've got a strike silent and a chime silent, so you can turn off everything. It's obviously a 3-train movement, and I see it's retailed by Dutton & Son of Oldbury. The date we're talking about are the last few years of the last century. Maybe just sort of into this century, but I'd rather say the 1890s in all honesty. So originally, of course, this would have been very nicely silvered and these gilt numbers would have shown up very well. Now, someone's obviously had a crack at cleaning this, but this can be resilvered without any trouble at all. Slightly unusual. I was expecting for a clock of this size to see 8 gongs, but we've only got 4. Obviously 3 trains, so 3 different weights. The mirrored back. But just look at it. I mean, look at the carving in this oak case. So, what would it fetch at auction? Probably £5,000 or £6,000 as a bare minimum. And to the right customer who wanted a big clock for a very large, impressive house, I could well see somebody spending at least £10,000 to £12,000 in a shop for it. So, keep looking after it.
I know, it's never going to go. It's in the family. It's too much to us.
Rapp and Hughes, I haven't heard of.
Oh yes, that was my grandfather. My grandfather's firm.
And this then came straight down through the family line?
Nearly, not quite. Well, it's a funny story really, because my grandfather, when he died, he forgot to make a codicil or a special note in his will to say that he wished this to come down to his granddaughter, which is me. And so in fact it all went up to a sale with all the other clocks and other very fine pieces that he had. And my father had to actually go and rebid for this clock to get it back again so that it could come down through the family.
That's great. This is it's always interesting to find documentation. He got into clocks in quite a big way because, in fact, this advertising document, and this is a proof, it's very interesting, it's dated on the back 1905, and there's a lovely note here, and it says, "Sir or Madam, we respectfully beg to draw your attention to our yearly winding and repairing by contract." This is the bit I like. "Many valuable clocks, etc., have been rendered useless for want of skillful and practical attention." It's wonderful.
My mother keeps the clock in her house, and in fact it is wound and it keeps very, very good time. It's never needed any adjustment or any repair.
Well, I was about to say that, but what happened to the case? It's green.
What's the key?
No, that's green. The case is all gone green.
I don't know. It all wants re-gilding, doesn't it?
Yeah. In fact, it's not too bad. The clock itself is French.
Yes.
Yes, French, and quite late in the last century, probably around about 1885. We call them 4-glass clocks for the very logical reason that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 glasses in the case. And usually they're much plainer than this. This one is a particularly elaborate case, and the dial with its diamante bezel.
Yes.
I did hope it was diamonds.
No, it's very much diamantes. Now, if you look at the inside of the case, clearly, because the doors have been shut, except for when you wind it, the gilding, of course, has survived very well. Whereas on the outside, I suspect at some time there's been some very acidic atmosphere, and you've actually got green verdigris.
Yes, it's bad. That's very bad. I knew that.
The answer is it wouldn't be too bad a thing to have it regilded, providing you can get it done by somebody who can get the colour correct.
But would I need to use an expert to have it gilded, or could I do it?
Oh, you definitely need an expert. No,
I'm an illuminator. I work with gold.
But this is electrogilding. This is done by electrogilding. It's done by placing the rarest parts of the clock into a solution of gold, dissolved in some very unpleasant chemicals.
Really?
Passing an electric current through, and the gold is basically attracted onto the surface of the metal. A very good
So I've been
expert.
very wise not to touch it. Yes. It's bothered me because it looks rather derelict, doesn't it?
Well,
On the
take very good
outside.
advice before you do it.
Yes.
But financially it's worth doing. I suppose you would have to pay for this tarted up, if we can use that word in its best sense.
Yes.
You'd have to pay well over £2,000.
That's more than the clock's worth.
Oh no, it's worth that. not to have it done. No, that's what it's worth. Well, I like that very much. It sort of fits my wrist like a glove. The wristwatch market is quite an interesting phenomenon of the last few years, and it's influenced by all sorts of different factors: size, shape, material, what the watch does, who made it. This has a number of characteristics that actually put it in the area of the better end of the market. First of all, it's rectangular or square in shape of the dial, but it's a rectangular watch. It's in white gold. It is unusually flat. And if we can open the movement, and I've got a knife here, which I'm sure we're going to have 100 letters saying.
Here we go.
If I can just take this delicate little instrument to open it here. Normally I can open them with my fingers, but this one has a very, very tight case. There we are.
Oh, well done.
All right. We can look at the movement, which again is an important consideration. And here we've got, immediately one can notice that it's actually got one particular little detail that makes it rather special. It's actually a minute repeating wristwatch. It's not unique. They made a number of them. Not specifically this firm, but certain firms, Vacheron Constantin, Patek Philippe, made minute repeating wristwatches. And Gobelin were more retailers than manufacturers. They actually had watches specifically created for them to sell. And this is the name on this watch, Gobelin of Lucerne. Now, the particular movement here is 29 jewels. It's beautifully finished, machined, decoration all over it. It's adjusted for 7 positions. That means temperatures, 7 adjustments on it, rather. That means for temperature, for positions, and for various different types. And 7 is almost as many adjustments as they make. That means the watch was tested before it was delivered in various positions and at various different temperatures. The actual train of wheels here is made out of a gold alloy. And this unique little feature where actually when I pull the lever on the side, the hours, the quarters and the minutes on the 2 gongs. Now people have actually faked these watches in the past. They've taken round movements and fitted them into rectangular cases, or taken miniature pocket watch movements and fitted them into cases. In this case, I'm absolutely sure there's no problem at all. The case, the back of the case, has the same number as the watch itself. It has the proper Swiss 18-carat mark for the white gold and the small punch of the head, which is the control mark. And it's signed Gobelin, and it's signed Gobelin on here. The strap I'm not so sure about. That is white gold also, but it doesn't bear the same marks, and I think it might have been fitted later. Fascinating. Do you ever wear it?
No.
No. So,
wouldn't dare.
Give me a little clue as to how you got it.
Well, it's my father's and his father's before.
His father's. So it's not sort of, you're not collectors or anything?
No, just had it in the family, you know, all my life, you know.
Well, I suppose you'd like an idea about it.
Oh, bad idea.
You've put me in a bit of a spot there because this has been a strong market in recent months and years, and I hope it'll continue. But I think at the moment, I'd have to say that this would not be worth less than £50,000.
What? You're joking.
I'm not joking at all. I'm glad you brought it in. It's made my day.
It's made mine as well.